Gaslighting can be a very harmful and damaging form of interpersonal abuse. So, what do you do if you're being gaslit in a relationship? In today's video, we're going to be talking about practical steps you can take to counteract gaslighting. Hi everyone. One of the big challenges with gaslighting is that it can be so covert and slippery to the extent that it becomes difficult to know when it's happening. It can cause people to question their own sanity and how they're interpreting what's going on around them. So what we're going to be talking about in today's video is how you cope with and counteract gaslighting if you find yourself in a gaslighting relationship. But before I get into that, just a couple of disclaimers to go over. I'm a registered psychologist in the province of British Columbia, Canada, and this video is for informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute or replacement for advice from your doctor or mental health professional. Now, with those things out of the way, let's start talking about coping with gaslighting. Now, I've done a couple of videos where I've talked about what gaslighting is, signs and symptoms that you're experiencing gaslighting, and ways of identifying gaslighting behavior in other people. If you haven't already, I strongly encourage you to take a look at those videos as they give a lot of background and context to what we're going to be talking about in today's video. So today's video is about the steps that you can take once you recognize and are aware that you're in a gaslighting relationship. And that's the very first step. It's identifying that you're in a gaslighting relationship. And this can be much easier said than done, as gaslighting is all about creating confusion, uncertainty, and having you doubt yourself. This is why it's so important to be aware of some of the signs and symptoms that you might experience from gaslighting and how you can spot gaslighting behavior in other people. Another thing you can do is to save the evidence of your interactions with the person who's gaslighting you. Like I mentioned earlier, gaslighting can cause you to question yourself and question what actually happened. Therefore, it can be really important to preserve evidence of your experiences and interactions as a way of clarifying what happened, rather than having to rely on potentially confused or uncertain memories of the interactions. So, things like keeping a journal of what's going on in your interactions with the person, saving text messages that they've sent you, keeping emails. By doing these things, you can look back on this evidence and remind yourself about what actually happened. This can help reduce some of the doubt and self-questioning that can often arise from gaslighting. It can be really important to distance yourself from what's going on. And what I mean by this is to try and take a step back from the intense emotions that are being triggered by the gaslighting. One of the simplest ways of doing this is to physically leave the situation. You might find yourself in an argument with the person who's gaslighting you and feel really confused as to what's actually going on and how you even ended up in this fight. Therefore, by physically removing yourself from the situation, you get away from the argument, and it gives you an opportunity to reflect on what actually happened without the gaslighter there challenging what you're saying and what you're thinking. Removing yourself physically from the situation can also help distract yourself and help you think about something completely unrelated to the interactions with the person, as a bit of a mental break from the abuse. Another way of distancing yourself from the gaslighting relationship is to imagine yourself not being in the relationship, or what it would look like if you withdrew from the relationship, if you started putting more distance between you and the other person. Now, this might cause you to feel some anxiety, as you may have some important and deep connections with the other person. As human beings, it's almost like we're pre-programmed to focus on fear of loss and what we could potentially lose if we ended the relationship. However, it's important to remember that this is an abusive relationship dynamic. And so there can be a lot of value in changing that dynamic. But imagining yourself distancing from the other person might lead you to seeing some of the positives and benefits of pulling back from the relationship. Think about how you might feel withdrawing yourself from the relationship, how your life would look different, and some of the positives that this might have on how you feel. Related to this, it's important to acknowledge what you're feeling and to give yourself permission to feel how you feel. Don't beat yourself up for feeling confused, conflicted, or ambivalent about the relationship. You may find yourself one day thinking about how much you value and care about this person, but then they do something and it frustrates the heck out of you because they've completely undermined you or criticized you or made you feel lesser than. And so you might find yourself getting upset with yourself as to why you can't figure out how you actually feel about this person. The messing with your head is a part of the gaslighting behavior, and being confused or uncertain about the relationship doesn't necessarily mean that you're the one who screwed up or that you're the one who can't get it together. Associated with this, it's really important to focus on being compassionate with yourself. Now, I know it can be hard to be compassionate with yourself even at the best of times. A lot of people often struggle with self-compassion as we tend to be our own worst critics. But this self-compassion is even harder when you're in a gaslighting relationship and you're questioning your own judgment and reality. So it becomes really important to focus on not beating yourself up for being in the situation that you're in. Remind yourself that the gaslighting behavior wasn't your fault. There's nothing you could or should have done differently to avoid being gaslit. You're not the perpetrator. You're not the instigator. It's the gaslighting that is attempting to control and manipulate you, and that's not your fault. It's really important to remind yourself of that because it can be really easy to turn on yourself when you're being gaslit. One critically important step you can take is to seek out support and input and outside perspective from people you trust and who care about you. One of the things that gaslighting aims to do is to separate you from your supports and separate you from the people who care about you. So it becomes really important that you talk with friends or family members about what you're going through. Let them know what's going on and ensure that you're keeping in touch with them so that you're not being isolated from the people who really care about you. Be sure to ask them for their perspective about what's going on. Share with them some of the experiences that you've documented in your journal, or share with them the text message exchanges or the emails that you've saved. Ask them for a reality check on your behavior and the other person's behavior. They may be able to point out some things that are going on that you're missing or confirm some of the ways that you're thinking about the situation, which maybe you were doubting yourself about. Ask them to be brutally honest with you. Sometimes close friends or family members don't want to upset you or criticize someone you care about, let them know it's okay. And that part of why you're asking them for your perspective is that you're confused and unsure about what's actually going on. You can start changing the dynamic of the gaslighting relationship by making small decisions and setting defendable boundaries. If you typically do what the person asks you to do in order to avoid a fight or argument, you can try practice being assertive and saying no. You have every right to decline to do something that you don't want to do. It's fully within your right to express what you're thinking or how you're feeling. And you shouldn't have to tiptoe around the potential reaction of the other person. Now, by taking these small steps of setting boundaries and being assertive, it may trigger even more of the gaslighting behavior, which may lead to further arguments or abuse. And the key with this is to not engage with those arguments. That's one of the traps that people will often fall into, is that they try to argue with the gaslighter using reason and data and evidence. But gaslighting isn't rational behavior, and gaslighters won't respond to your logic, and they won't admit what they're doing. So if you find yourself in a situation where a simple conversation turned into the person attacking you, insulting you, or questioning your abilities or sanity, it's okay to set a boundary of disengaging from the argument, walking away from the other person. You see, the thing is, we're so used to the social niceties of trying to wrap up a conversation before we walk away. But in a situation where you're in a no-win argument with someone who's gaslighting you, one of the best and simplest boundaries you can set is to just walk away. And this leads us to one of the most challenging things to do, which is to give yourself permission to leave the relationship. Part of what makes it so difficult to leave a gaslighting relationship, part of what makes the relationship so sticky, is that you likely have a very close relationship with the person who's gaslighting you. They might be one of the closest or most important people in your life. They may be your best friend, your mom, your dad, a sibling, or the person who you thought was the love of your life. These are important people. And so it's tempting to want to do everything you can to salvage or maintain the relationship. But it's also important to remind yourself that it's okay to walk away from a toxic relationship, regardless of who it's with. And yes, it's going to be a loss. If you didn't care about this person, you wouldn't put up with the gaslighting behavior. So while it's difficult, ending the relationship with someone who's gaslighting you is often the most effective way to end the abuse. And it's important to remember that that's what gaslighting is. It's a form of mental and emotional abuse. And you don't have to stay in a relationship with someone who's abusing you just because of the bonds of affection that may have formed with this person well prior to the gaslighting abuse. And finally, the last thing I want to talk about is the importance of practicing trusting yourself again, being able to trust yourself again. Once you've ended the relationship with the gaslighter, it's important to recognize that it's going to take some time and some practice for you to start trusting your instincts and your perceptions again. The abuse and damage from gaslighting can last a while. So don't expect that once you're out of the gaslighting relationship, you're not going to have any scars from it. It's important to remind yourself that it's normal and that it's okay that you may not trust your instincts and your perceptions right away. It's important to remind yourself that the person who you were told you were by the gaslighter, that's not who you actually are. They created an image and a facade of you that didn't actually represent who you are. And they repeatedly told you that's who you are. So allow yourself some time before you feel like you have your feet back underneath you and that you can trust yourself again. So those are 10 ways that you can combat and work towards changing and escaping a gaslighting relationship. And I want to emphasize that these things can be really difficult to do because of just how challenging and damaging gaslighting is. But if you're able to use some of these tips and tools, they can hopefully help you get out of an abusive gaslighting relationship. So I'd love to hear your thoughts and ideas or questions about this, so please leave me some comments in the comments section down below. If you've been enjoying my videos and would like to see more, please hit that subscribe button and notification bell, and you'll be alerted every week when I post a new video. So that's all for today's video. As always, thank you for making it all the way to the end of this video, and I will see you in the next one.